Hi, I'm Kwame Kwei-Armah. I'm currently Artistic Director of the Young Vic Theatre in London. And well, I'm overjoyed actually to be part of the Inspiring Leadership podcast. I'm going to hand over to your host, Jonathan Bowman-Perks.
Well, thank you very much, Kwame. It's really special. And I think the lovely thing is you were recommended as someone who others find very inspiring. I don't get people who approach me and say, I'm inspiring, I want to be on your series. That's a bit of an oxymoron. It doesn't kind of work that way. It's all about recommendations. And I think it was Joel Blake who found you very inspiring. You two met in Birmingham. But would you perhaps begin by telling us a bit about this fascinating role you have at the moment? What you're doing right now, some of those things would be interesting. And then we'll go back to childhood. But just tell us a bit about the Young Vic and what you're doing right now.
Right. Well, as I said, and actually thank you for inviting me on. I don't think anybody ever wakes up in the morning and says, hi, I'm inspiring. But it is inspiring to be in conversation with you. So thank you for that. My current gig is I'm the Artistic Director, as I've said, of the Young Vic Theatre. And really what that is that's a curating gig. Now, there are other arms to me, as it were. I'm also a writer at the moment. I have a couple of movies that I'm writing, and I'm also a director. And then I have a couple of plays that I'm going to direct, amongst other things. And I like, if I must, I like to describe myself as generative, interpretive, and a curatorial artist. When I'm writing, I'm generating, of course. When I'm directing, I'm interpreting. And when I'm being an AD, I'm curating. So yeah, within that context, I'm currently at our theatre at the moment. We have a wonderful version of Hamlet starring Cush Jumbo at the moment. It's been celebrated, which is really lovely. And we're about to open a new play by James Graham, the acclaimed playwright, about set in the kind of the world of punditry in the late 1960s. And I'm really excited about that. In terms of writing, my latest musical opened at the Public Theatre called The Visitor in New York. And then I have a couple of other movies and things that are in active pre-production, as they say.
Wow, that's an awful lot going on. And of course, the world of entertainment, theatres and movies and things has been so hard hit by the pandemic. I mean, do you just want to give us a flavour of just how tough it's been for your colleagues, yourself, in the new endemic that we're now in?
Yeah, I mean, in theatre in particular, and I think it's, I think that COVID-19 has affected different industries in different ways. But I think in theatre, we were technically closed for 18 months. We are a citadel of live entertainment, a kind of 21st century church, and we couldn't let people in to commune. And so that was really hard. And actually, we were very blessed by the government's schemes that helped to keep us afloat. But it was really hard being dark. But actually, we're now probably on our fourth production. We opened again in July, I think. And it's proving very hard. It's really, really hard to get people back up to speed. The mental resilience of, I include myself, but of many in our sector has been deeply, deeply bruised and damaged. And I think it's going to take a long while before we're back to whatever the normal was before. And that's even before we think about the new normal.
Yeah, it's going to be an impact that will go on for many years to come. One of the ladies who's going to be on the podcast in the future is Sharon Peacock, CBE, who's the government's microbiologist who's in charge of the COVID response. And she said to me the other day, and I thought it quite profound, that the endemic will be with me all my life. I'm 60. The rest of my life it will be here. We'll have to find ways to adapt and adjust. And this winter, the influenza will hit the country very hard, and other places too, because we haven't developed immunity to it over the last year or two. So I think, yeah, we need to be particularly resilient. But amazing what you're doing now, and just deep respect for all those multiple things, juggling and spinning. I remember those old spinning plate games they used to have, and I have this image of you running around the stage, just keeping them all
running around my house and
I can see that. But take me back to yourself as a young man and your upbringing, and parents, grandparents, any teachers. What sort of shaped you to be the man, and very successful, modest though you are to all that I've spoken to, hugely successful. What has shaped you into the man you are today? Give me perhaps 5 minutes on that. I'd be interested in your life.
I think that's always a very hard question, isn't it? Because I think introspection, I don't always know that it's 360. I think we see the bits that we like to see. And if I were answering that in one sentence, which I won't, I'll expand. I would say what made me the man that I am today, or the person that I am today, was really the brilliance of my mother. Her foresight, her stoicness, her joy, her love, her generosity, her sense of community. I think all of those things have deeply impacted my psyche. And I think I kind of defined myself through those rather large symbols of humanity that she placed up in front of me as a child. I'm the eldest child of 2 economic migrants. Well, at least the oldest child of my mother's. My father was married before, so I'm in that weird position of I'm number 4, I think, of my father's, and I'm number 1 of my mother's. But yeah, I was the first one born here in this country. They were from the West Indian island of Grenada, and so that has a different kind of responsibility. Because even when some family members, my sister joined us when she was older, I still kind of had the kind of head child frame, because I was born with the luxury of being born here in this country and the responsibilities that came with that. My family home was a magnificent home, and it was very warm and very loving and such fun. I mean, I keep looking back and going, am I making it up? Am I just remembering only the good times and not the bad? And there were some very, very heavy times. We lived during the times when I would describe the streets of Great Britain as being terribly cold in terms of race. But inside my house was, I always felt safe. There was, I remember very clearly, and not to even expound on it, but I remember clearly the police, kicking down my front door, or my parents' front door, running into my father's room and pulling down his wardrobes, and even another time, pushing the door in, and my brother was, he was hit with the door, and his lip was bleeding, and of course my father was never charged with anything. My father was not that kind of citizen, but we grew up during the time of naked aggression, and also as I was growing up, as I've said, the inside of my house was terribly warm, but the outside, white youth culture at the time defined itself through the lens of the skinheads, which was a racist movement, even though it listened to Black music. And so it meant that outside of my immediate circle of Southall, where I grew up, we were surrounded by aggressive xenophobia, nay, racism, that often made itself manifest in terms of me or my cousins or my friends being stabbed or sliced. So it was like, we lived in a war zone. Like every day, I went to school 7 miles away, and I can still remember the fear of leaving Southall and hitting Hanwell, and then West Ealing, and then Ealing, and then hitting Acton. And Acton and the poorer parts of East Acton was just like, it was a war zone. You expected every day to be jumped or beaten or chased. So again, when I juxtapose the coldness of the exterior against the warmth and the love and the diversity and the neurodiversity that was in my household, I have to say that I was defined less by the external hate and more by the internal love.
Wow. I just can't imagine that environment. My only nearest experience is, being on the streets of Northern Ireland or Bosnia, which were war zones of their own making, and you didn't know where the next attack was coming from, and you were out and you were on patrol. And you were just constantly alert and looking for areas where you might be attacked from. And I suppose it must have been like that in
I mean, you know, I don't want to be churlish. You compare it to a actual war zone with guns and explosions, but you're absolutely right. One felt mortally threatened on a daily basis, and you're absolutely right that even to this day, if I hear for like 4 footsteps in a row that go ba 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 ba, I will naturally spin on my axis. I will look behind me while running backwards. I will naturally, because growing up, if you heard that you thought that was a skinhead that was about to cut you. And so you'd move and then you'd keep running so as to avoid it, and then sight the enemy, as it were, and then keep it moving. So again, not to compare it to you know, genocides or you know, sectarian troubles, but for me, it was existential.
Yeah, and I'm very grateful to you when we chatted a few months ago to plan this session. I said, look, I am so ignorant about this whole area. I want to learn more. You know, I've lucky when I went to the military academy at Santos that I made some great friends. Errol Stewart, who was from Jamaica, and when Lee and I got married 6.5 years ago, Errol was our best man in Jamaica, in Ocho Rios. And we've stayed the greatest of friends, and he introduced me to all his Jamaican friends, and we've been over a few times. Jeffrey Bostic from Barbados, and Jeffrey's now, poor guy's the health minister in charge of Barbados. Which, of course, you can imagine all the COVID problems that they've got at the moment. Then there was Anwar, Mr. Anwar, who was from Jordan, and he's now a major general looking after the King of Jordan. And then there was Himalaya Thapa, who ended up as a major general looking after the Nepali earthquake and all the dramas that happened. And the one guy we haven't yet tracked down is Mr. Belengi, who came from Zaire. We've never seen him. I'm afraid I think a coup ended up with him disappearing, because he was a member of the rebel forces who became the government and then went out of power again. But the reason I say that is that they taught me aged 18 about what it was like to perceive the racism within what was apparently a nice environment of a military academy with British officer cadets, but this arrogance and just failure to see what it was like to be living their lives and how they were treated. And I was thinking to you that you got me into reading Malcolm X's autobiography. I'm dyslexic, so I listened to it. I was reading up about Marcus Garvey, who you taught me about. And also I've been loving listening to Roots, which is a hell of a story, but just also gives you perspective. And until you've started to read some of these things, I just realized just how little I know. Anything you want to perhaps add to all that?
Yeah, I mean, again, what's very interesting, and of course, as you said, we spoke a few months ago, and I may have referenced those as foundational texts for me. What's really interesting is, and relating to your original question about what made me the man that I am, I often describe myself as being walked into manhood by Malcolm X on one hand, Muhammad Ali on the other, and then being gently pushed by the playwright August Wilson from behind. But the person that I leave out actually is Alex Haley, and who was the writer of both Roots, and the author rather of both Roots, and the writer of the autobiography of Malcolm X.
Oh, I didn't realize you did both. Wow.
Yeah, he did both. And so actually 2 seminal pieces of literature that changed my life. The artist, the writer, was right at the heart of it. And I think that also has fed into my dedication to want to use art as a catalyst for debates on issues that I perceive to be important.
Yeah, no, the power of the pen or the movie. I mean, as I said to you, my medium of learning is auditory and visual. I'll watch, documentaries and movies. The reading I do, it's harder, but I'm soaking it up in this way. And so the power that you have in making a movie or being a singer, an actor, a writer, a director, a producer, all these skills you have, it's a great responsibility, and it's a great honor, isn't it?
It absolutely really is a great honor. And I say it's a great honor because, and again, I often reference my parents. My mother was a nurse. She was an auxiliary nurse. working nights on the weekends in Hillingdon Hospital. And my father worked in a factory, Quaker Oats. And in particular, my mother did 3 jobs. They were not 3 jobs that she loved. I get to do, multiple jobs that I absolutely love, and the honor of being able to not make a living, because that always just reduces it to money, but to be able to function within the world of art, to be able to know that there is another one around the corner, that there's another way of articulating this. Sometimes it's in song, other times it's in a podcast, other times it's in a play, another time it might be in a movie. To be able to be part of all of those worlds. I mean, it's a huge honor. And every time I get a bad review or something from a show or something at work, takes me down, I remember that I'm blessed.
Yeah, because it is quite important that we put everything in perspective. And one of the old things I remember my old Sergeant Major used to say when I was worrying about something, we were in Bosnia, keeping the Dayton Peace Accord, he'd go, "Boss, has anybody died?" And I went, "No." He said, "Then really, let's put this in perspective. It's not that serious." And I think, yeah, putting things in perspective. But I also have great respect that the creativity that you have to have, and the new ideas and the different angles and the twists in stories and messages. There must come the days when you go, "Oh, I'm dried up. I've got to come up with something." The pressure on you to keep producing. Tell me about that.
There's such joy in idea generation. And and when I say joy, I sometimes mean, someone said to me the other day, "Do you speak to yourself sometimes?" And I went, "Well, we all do, don't we?" And I said, "Yes," is the answer. And then she said, "Do you ever say anything nice to yourself when you speak to yourself?" And I realized that I absolutely don't. Like, "Oh, you idiot, you idiot." And I'm always, like, if I am, it's a chastisement, except during idea generation. Like, sometimes you might find a turn in a story and smile to yourself, "Oh, I like that." And another time you might find a gag and go, "Oh, that's quite funny. That's good. I'm going to keep that."
Yeah.
And there is joy in seeking to find the thing that will communicate your idea in the most efficient fashion.
Yeah.
And sometimes, as I said, and sometimes there are days when I am just typing, not writing. And then there are other days when it's all inspiration. And I think part of the balance is having the discipline on those typing days to just have faith that some writing will emerge out of the typing that you're currently doing.
Yeah, that's a very good way of putting it. And I think there is this psychological truism that the level of kindness you show to yourself is the limit that you can be kind to other people. We often think, I can be hard to myself, but I'll be nice to other people. No, if you're really tough on yourself and run yourself down, it'll seep into your relationships with others. So it really is important to actually show some kindness to yourself. Because
I like that, Johnson. I really like that, because I don't know that I'm nodding as if I'm going, yeah, I do that. And I don't know that. I'm quite hard on myself. But what I am very mindful of is sometimes is to look at my own failures and my own failings and insecurities. And when others have transgressed, view their transgressions through the lens of my own failings. There are just some things that I do that people just go, I just don't understand. Why would he do that? But I know I do it because it's the way that I've constructed myself to survive. And so I try and do that with others. When I go, what the hell would they think of? Why would they do that? And I try and think about the thing in me that others might not understand. And hopefully that gives me empathy, not always sympathy, but certainly empathy towards why they have done the thing that I haven't quite understood. So I have not conquered the not being hard on myself, therefore not being hard on others. And I think others might say that of me. Others, I would accept that as a fault, that others might say, I look at others partly through the lens of, well, look, I just ran 10 miles. I mean, I don't run, but why didn't you? And then I have to check myself and go, well, because people are built differently.
Yeah, I think that's very sound. And I had a great mentor many years ago, general as he is now, but he was a commanding officer, and he said to me, if something goes wrong, it's a teachable moment. And you ask yourself, what have I learned? What am I going to do differently? And if you treat the people who work for you, that's a teachable moment, and you can teach them something from it, and they can recover from it, growing the stronger.
Yes.
That's true leadership. That's true leadership. And I found that quite profound. I don't always do it. I will, chastise myself as well, rather than going, okay, it didn't work out. What have I learned? What am I going to do differently? But as you and I were talking before the show began, in this period of time in accident and emergency and hospital over the last few weeks, I looked back and I thought, what are the lessons I learned from that? And what will I do differently? And so I think everything and everybody we meet has something to teach us, if only we'd listen. And I think, that horrendous experiences of being sliced at or stabbed by skinheads in an unsafe warlike zone taught you something. The question is what? I don't know, but every experience has something to teach us. And maybe it's to be more appreciative of what we do have rather than what we don't, as you said earlier. I think that was profound.
I don't know. I do this a lot now, of course. We take the blows that life gives us, and then I go, what can I learn from it? And I don't always have that answer.
Yeah.
And I have tried to make myself continually ask that of myself and of the world and of those that I trust, while at the same time trying to forgive myself for not having the answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So long as I am continually in pursuit of it.
Yeah. I think it's a lifetime's journey.
Yeah.
We're always learning. And I get very worried if any of the leaders I talk to and I say to them, when was the last time you were dead wrong? And they go, think about, was it 1982? Come on, really? And then how quickly did you learn and how quickly did you resolve it? Thinking about your fascinating life and career thus far, what would be a proudest moment? And what did you learn from it? And what would be a darkest moment? And what did you learn from that imposter and treating them just the same?
I think my proudest moment, and they're always very hard, right? Because we all love our babies. But I think the proudest moment would be, I was the artistic director of a thing called the World Festival of Black Arts and Culture in Senegal in 2010. And hitherto, the only thing that I directed was 6 actors on the then tricycle stage. And what they asked of me with this festival was to direct, or to write and direct a piece of stadium theater held at the Senghor Stadium with a cast of 500.
Wow.
An audience of 60,000.
Oh.
And then curate a 3-week international festival of the arts that asked the central question, where will Africa be in 100 years' time? And I kind of just said, when I was asked, I was a bit like, yeah, of course. Had I been asked just as an artist, I would have been overjoyed. If I'd been asked to represent Britain as an artist, because it was a hysterical festival, I also would have just been over the moon. But to be asked to lead it when I'd never AD'd anything before was almost a miracle. And my proudest moment was the night of the opening ceremony. And I won't bore you with many of those who did not believe in the vision that I'd put out, or the vision that I was trying to walk towards, and all of the issues that we had around it. But the night when we got to the end, and I heard 60,000 people roar, and about 8 or 10 presidents stand to their feet as we captured the history of Africa in a piece of theater. I remember walking, the circumference of the stadium and just saying thank you. And when I say thank you, I mean thank you to, we don't do these things by ourselves, in my fundamental belief. I said thank you to whatever it is that anyone believes in or does not is fine. But for me, I said thank you to the energy that allowed that that manifestation. So wow. I would describe that as my proudest moment. And there are others that I'm really, really proud about, but I would describe that as that.
Yeah, yeah.
And equally, and again, I'm speaking professionally because I think that the worst moment I had, I think, was a couple of years back when I was accused of stealing someone's work, which I had not done. And they had deliberately thrown me under the bus because the person who they may have been pointing their fingers at was too big, too strong, too famous. And so they kind of threw me under the bus. And I and the Young Vic and the staff were just abused by social media in the most racist and the most demoralizing and violent of fashions. And it was organized and coordinated, and they came for me. And it was really hard. And I remember, there was one day when an arts program on the radio had asked me to come on and defend myself, quote unquote, and everybody around me was advising me, don't do it. And I wanted to, because I was a bit like, I do not have anything to hide. I don't, and I took the advice, and then they asked the people who were accusing me of this thing to come on and attack me, and I was like, I don't know what to do. The only equipment I have is honesty. The only equipment I have is truth, and I can't get through the noise with this truth. And I was really demoralized, and I got a phone call from someone who said, I'm reading about what's happening to you, and the people who are accusing you of this did this to me.
Oh, wow.
I just need to let you know. And they went on to explain part of the motivation. I remember, Jonathan, I was with three staff members at the time, who will be friends for life. And because it was being under fire. And I remember crying. And I just cried. I'm not trying to do macho thing like a man don't cry. I cry all the time, but I seldom cry in front of colleagues. And I remember just bursting into tears. Just that sense of relief that someone, at least one person, can hear my truth. Mm. And I would describe that as the coldest, whitest day that I have lived through professionally.
Yeah, I'm really sorry for what you had to go through, and I can't imagine how tough that is. And one of the tech companies that I work with, that called Digital Identity Net, they're trying to find a way of having two parts to your digital identity, so that on social media, only the people whose identity you can confirm can communicate with you. And I think it's a really important step to stop this trolling and people attacking you without actually having the courage to put their names to it.
Yes.
And doing what they're doing, because whether it be abuse of footballers over racism or whatever it might be, or anything like that, I think there's an awful lot of cowards who hide behind social media to try and destroy people. But if their names were out there and they could be found for what they do, and indeed found guilty of doing defamatory things or whatever they might be, I think the world would be a lot safer. If that was the case.
I think you're absolutely right to be entering into discussions about how do we monitor and how do we look after our mental health and our morality in this world of instant gratification via our thumbs. Because in truth, let's look. I also try to often take myself out of this time, and I go back to the fear that every and any celebrity had of the Sunday newspapers, not but a decade ago. the Sunday expose, where you had the fake person come and entrap you, or the honey trap, or the blah blah, and everyone lived in fear of some exposure or not. So it's not unique to our times. It's just louder, more amplified, and easier to access. And I think it's incumbent upon a society to look at itself and says, at your worst, who are you?
It's a really good one. And also, you would hope that just by being honest and true and doing the right things, you'd be okay. But that isn't the case when you come across some white collar psychopaths.
It's not. But also, and again, I think it's about the world, right, that we find ourselves living in, and we in the global north, we have so much, and we are trained to look for the things that we do not have so we can acquire them to feel better about ourselves. And that, in terms of our mental well-being, is a real challenge.
Yeah.
So when we are made to feel ugly, when we are made to feel less than the world has told us we should be, reaching and taking others down seems to be a natural or an instantaneous response. And I think we have to train the next generations to know that when we don't feel at our best, that making others feel worse may not be the answer.
Yeah, you've hit on two truisms psychologically. One is the sort of seesaw effect, that people believe that they can tip the seesaw down in their favor, and that perhaps by pulling others down, they'll feel better, but they don't. That's the first thing, that people think that in order to feel better, they'll do that. The other one is the paradox of a success versus happiness. The definition of success is getting what you want, and happiness is wanting what you already have. And I think there's a reckoning to be had, particularly around the environment and all that goes on, where we're going, I've got an Apple Watch. Wow, well done, I've got an Apple Watch. Oh, perhaps I need another watch. No, I don't need another watch. I've got one watch and that's all I need. But I'm in marketing and I want you to have a different color strap and another watch and sell you more shite. Well, I don't want any more shite. I've got lots of stuff.
Yep.
And if we stop being sold to that we need, that happiness is getting more stuff, which it definitely isn't. And happiness is about appreciating what you already have and how lucky you are.
It's hard though, isn't it, Jonathan, when you haven't got the stuff to hear that.
Oh, right?
Yeah. It's really hard to go, and particularly I think about women. There were I'm told there were 60,000 adverts a day targeted at us, right? So we take in 60,000 new impulses. And if they're all coming at you, when we were growing up, there were 3 channels and then it went to 4. And now there is 15 million channels and 1 trillion different ways of hitting you via the internet. And if I am being told over and over again, I'm not good enough, or to have this means you are good enough, I must have low self-esteem. And I must have a way of making myself instantaneously feel better. And so actually what we, in my humble opinion, our entire system is built on the targeting of the human psyche.
Yeah.
To want more.
Yeah. And the fear of missing out, FOMO.
Yeah. The fear of not getting some. Yeah. So I think it's hard. It's certainly beyond me, but in terms of finding the answer. But I do profoundly believe that the next generation coming in will see the excesses of this. Never before in human history have people had so loud a microphone so quickly at hand. Never has that happened. And so, we kind of have to get used to these immediate excesses. And then I think hopefully the next gen will come through and they will curtail some of those excesses.
A very, very good point you make. And thinking about the next generation, let's take you back to when you were that next generation as a young 16-year-old lad, knowing what you know now and all the experiences you've had and mistakes you've made and successes you've had. What if you go back and meet your 16-year-old self in your DeLorean Back to the Future car, what bit of advice would you say, hey, this matters, but this doesn't? What would your bit of wisdom be to a young 16-year-old back then?
It's really hard, isn't it? Not to fall on, trite cliches. But I think what I would say, and this just slightly doesn't answer the question a little bit, but I think what I would say to my 16-year-old self is, keep believing. In the face of much, keep believing. Have faith. And I remember, I say that because I remember my mother would often say a version of that to me. That when I was in my late teens and my early 20s, and probably right up to my 30s before I got the first kind of taste of quote unquote what we would call success. I remember my mother, I'd be poor and in need of cash and in need of favor from the world, recognition. And my mother would often say, don't worry, you're going to make it. You're going to make it. And though at the time that didn't really matter, and it mattered little, because I didn't need affirmation from my mother, I needed affirmation from the world, financially, career-wise. Later, I know that they were real footsteps. They were real things that I could cling on to psychologically. Someone believes in me.
Yeah, and it's so lovely, that story of your mother. And while our experience is so different, I had a mother who brought the three of us up on her own. My father was killed when I was 2.5. And that really turned our lives around. He was a fast jet pilot in the Fleet Air Arm, and suddenly we weren't guests of the Navy anymore. We weren't welcome, and we had to leave on a pittance of a pension, which wasn't enough to get by on. But I remember being told that I was thick and I was going to be a dustman at school at age about 7, because I couldn't spell, I couldn't do my maths. Well, it turned out I was dyslexic, but they didn't know in those years. It was many years later, probably only about 5 years ago, that I really had a test and found out I was severely dyslexic and dyscalculia, which is numbers as well.
That's me.
yeah. So, but look how we've both found a way. But the point was, my mother said to me, no, you're not going to be a dustman. I believe in you, and you'll have different intelligences, and you will find a way.
Amen.
And perhaps you'll be good with people. So mothers and fathers do have a massive impact on children. Sometimes they can be negative, the unmet needs of parents living through their children. You're going to go to Cambridge. I never went to Cambridge, but you're going to go to Cambridge. I don't want to go to Cambridge. Shut up. You're going to go to Cambridge. Is sometimes it can go badly wrong, but many times it's hugely inspirational. And my late mother, I'm forever grateful for her belief in me when I just thought I was thick and would describe to people I'm thick because the teacher had told me I was thick. And I can't believe the labeling they do. Let's go around the Inspiring Leadership Compass in a sort of quick fire way.
Right.
From moral question. If you had a favorite value that you like to live by, what particular foundational value have you always stuck to?
Kingdom heart.
Oh, say about that one. That's lovely.
It means, give people the benefit of the doubt. Give the most generous reading that you can of a situation, and try to access everyone through the largest possible heart that you can.
I love that. I have not heard that before. That's very special. Thank you. Kingdom heart. I will hang on to that. PQ, which is meaning and purpose. Why do you do what you do, Roy?
Because I believe we're here to serve, and I've been given the skills that I've been given in order to serve some greater good. And that is, in my humble opinion, to incrementally contribute to us being better than we were the day before.
Oh, love it. Absolutely love it. Health quotient is the next one. What do you do? We talked about mental health being really severely hit during those tough times. I said that 18 months when those theatres were closed and films were not being done and people couldn't meet. But what tip would you give on physical health? What tip would you give on mental health that served you well? And as Colin Powell, who I had a lot of respect for, in his book, he wrote his book and he called it "It Worked for Me." And I thought that's a really good one, because often people have this silver bullet: do this and you'll be a great leader, or do this and you'll, but it doesn't work for everybody. But what works for you mentally and physically in the health area?
I should say that I'm in no position to speak or give advice or even comment on in the health area, because I just do not have a health regime. I have only just in the last 2 months begun to do any physical exercise. It's the first time in like 10 years. And I have to say it wasn't working for me, hence the extra 10 COVID pounds above my heaviest weight. But actually in the last 2 months, as I've said, I've begun to think, all right, come on now. You're not getting any younger. What hits you now is going to stay there for a while. So I've started to do that. Mentally, though, I spend a lot of time thinking about that. And I think what works for me is I tend to not I tend to not inhale. And what I mean by that is, so if something is really brilliant or really successful, I kind of enjoy that for the moment, and then I press on and I put it back in its box. And if something is really bad or bad, then I'm in it because I can't help it emotionally for a moment. But then my attempt is to put it back in its box as soon as humanly possible. And I literally have a timetable in my brain. Like a show gets hit, there's bad reviews. I know that for about 3 days, I'm going to go, okay, I'm going to feel low. And it's going to almost get in the way of the next thing that I'm going to write. And then I'm going to go, no, you cannot allow it to get in the way of the next thing you're going to write. So you know what? Wallow in it for 2 days and then pick yourself up, brush yourself off and start all over again. And I think that kind of attitude is mentally, I think has helped me as I, in essence, I kind of go, okay, it's happened. And now what can you do to either make it better or to move forward?
Yeah, that's a really healthy attitude. Mentally, it's a very healthy attitude. And then from there on to what I call cultural intelligence, diversity, equality, inclusion. What would be your bit of wisdom about understanding difference and people who are different, and particularly around the topics we've talked about on racism, really?
Yeah, I was really fortunate as a child. I grew up in a very diverse part of London, Southall, as I've said before. And I remember really clearly, remembering white flight. And about when Idi Amin expelled the Asian community from Uganda, they came into Southall in quite large numbers. And I remember really clearly hearing people go, oh my God, it was only 50% Asian before, now it's 78%. And by the time I left home, Southall was being called Little India. But what was brilliant about that is you could look at it as one mass, or you could go, there were Punjabis and Gujaratis, and then there were West Indians, and there were Sikhs, and there were Hindus. And all of a sudden, this amorphous mass became groupings of diverse people with different cultural habits and inclinations. And then I began to understand that actually I was part of the global majority, not an ethnic minority. And once I landed that, I began to see that that diversity is a plus and monoculturalism is a minus.
That's very, very profound. Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to think about that for quite a while. From cultural intelligence quotient, CQ, to EQ, you have a lovely way with people. I've from the very moment that we met, I feel very psychologically safe with you. We can chat about almost any topic. You're very interesting, very stimulating. But what's a tip you've learned about connecting with people on an emotional and social level?
That's really hard to answer because quintessentially, I love people. I find this fascinating, and I find interactions rewarding, and I find it's partly why I'm a writer, observing people, how we negotiate our highs and our lows, to be, I don't know, I just think, again, whatever one believes in or not, whether one believes in a creator God or not, and I don't care whatever anyone else thinks. I don't mean I don't care what everything is, like I have no prejudice on whether people believe it, I don't. That if we were created, my God, what a brilliant creation. That we have such a myriad of personalities and processes and expressions. I find the human species to be fascinating, and so I tend to want to engage.
Yeah, no, you clearly love what you do. It shines through. From those early days of hearing the 4 steps and then having to spin and dance backwards at the same time as moving very quickly, you've had to learn about resilience against adversity, even though there was that warmth and that love in the home. What would be your top tip on resilience against adversity, and particularly when you get some real hammering from vindictive and unpleasant people who want to have a go at you or criticize you or whatever? What's your big learning about resilience?
I think it's having faith that life is long, that truth rises to the top sometimes, and it may take a lifetime for it to do that, but when it does, oh my God, it's satisfying. I think it is having faith that that which is right will happen. Doesn't always, but that would be that's my tip for resilience.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Yeah, hold on. Yeah, life is long. Yeah, and it is so interesting that many people, if you look through their biographies and things like that, and the impact, as we shared, of Malcolm X or something like that at the time they weren't, recognized in their own country as being a philosopher or a profound figure. It's often after their death that happens. And I suppose that would take me on to the next one, which is, what would you like your legacy to be when you die? Because you will die.
Yes.
But that's the only certainty. That's the only certainty I can guarantee.
That I will. Yes, I will. Yes.
What would you like your legacy to be from your work and your personal life?
I mean, again, I think it's really hard, isn't it? What is legacy? What does it mean? I think what I would like people to say of me is that I tried. I tried. I'm human and I failed at many things, but I tried. I think. And I think if I'm in terms of career, there is one thing that I'm very, 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 very proud of. And it's called the Black Cultural Play Archive. Sorry, the Black Play Archives at the National Theatre. And when I was breaking into the business as a playwright, Black plays were just not published. And so we always felt that we were somehow creating something new, that we were building the wheel all over again. And I got to a point where I went, that cannot be so. And so we started an initiative where when we went and we found over 300 plays that were professionally produced in the last century in Britain, and then we put it up on the website, which means that never again can a generation say, that we don't know the shoulders that we stand on. And I think that probably is one of the things I'm most proudest of.
I love that. But this whole concept of the shoulders we stand on, of those who've gone before and what they've done for us, and never underestimate the impact that a small group of determined men and women can achieve, because all the big changes in the world have been achieved by small groups of determined men and women. Brand.
The road to freedom is seldom walked by the multitude. Yes,
that's so true. The other aspect of the Inspired Leadership Compass is brand, reputation, BQ, brand, reputation, image, and impact. What have you found you've learned about brand that you'd pass on as a tip to others?
Brand can be a dirty word. It's not to me. We live in a world where people need to quantify things very, very quickly. Who you are, what you stand for, and what, when under fire, do you retreat to? What position do you retreat to is magnificently important. an example for me very quickly is that I remember when I was much younger, if I went out on a date with a woman, I'm heterosexual, so that would be my gender of choice, that I would judge them harshly if they were really bad to the waiting staff in a restaurant or rude to the waiting staff. And so, and so I put that in, I say that, so as to say that who you are when under fire is your brand.
Yes, I love that one. And in fact, it recalled a time when I was a managing director, and I had a couple of coaches who were associates, and one of them was always sucking up to the CEO of the business, but he was horrible to the receptionists. Yeah. And I said, who you are shouts out so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying. Yeah. And for me, the people who can't influence your career, the way you treat them, tells me so much about you compared to how you are with others. And one of my great, very moving moments when I was in hospital, being treated by the man who saved my brother's life, the surgeon, was everybody in this hospital knew my brother Graham. He'd worked there 25 years as a surgeon. The cleaning staff, the people who worked in the kitchens and brought the food, the porters, nurses, and so on, all different levels. And he had not distinguished between any of them. And one cleaner had once said to him 20 years ago, she still remembers this, she told me the story, your brother Graham, when he asked me who I was and what I did, and I met him in the corridor, and I explained who I was, and I said, I'm just a cleaner. And he said, no, Mary, you're not just a cleaner. You stop patients and staff getting MRSA because you keep this clean. You're a key member of the staff. Never underestimate the impact you make. And she said, I've never forgotten that. And I just found that deeply moving, that my brother Graham cares about everybody, whatever they are, walking with kings or with a common man. And he treats them all the same. And that's very rare. Amen. And it's a real inspiration to me.
Amen.
Very special. Sorry, that got me a bit.
No, please don't apologize.
Last 2 or 3 questions. Teams. You've pulled teams together, and you've inherited teams.
Yep.
And I just wonder, when you've had a team or a group that is quite toxic and it's not gelling, it's not working.
Yeah.
What tip would you give to get it to becoming a high performing team? What have you done?
I think a couple of things. I think number one is not getting in the way of those who wish to leave it. Even possibly encouraging the exit of those who wish to leave that team. And number 2 is to lead with kingdom heart. Is to say, here's what I believe in. Who's up for this? Who wants to stay for this ride? Now, that's very easy to say that. These things take years sometimes. But I do believe that the people in the room are ultimately the people who are supposed to be in the room. We say that as sometimes you're, as a director, you're auditioning and you're offering roles out, and the person you really wrote that for or wanted in this thing says no. And right up to the last minute, someone jumps in and you think, and then actually you get to opening night and you say, this role was always yours. Those who are in this room were meant to be in this room. Create the room that people want to be in.
Oh God, that's wow. Create the room that people want to be in. That's profound. That's the name of your next book.
Yeah. And again, I don't know if I do it successfully all the time, but when it has worked, those people, no matter whether you move jobs or continents, they stay in your life.
Yeah. No, I loved create the room you want to be in, but also I'm reminded of that comment that you meet people for a season, a reason, or a lifetime.
Amen.
And sometimes all 3. Yeah. And so why have I met this person? What is it I'm going to learn from them? It might be how not to lead. If I met Donald Trump, I'd know how not to lead.
Amen.
But if I met Desmond Tutu, it might be how do you show up and how are you present with people? in all the reading that you've done, when you've given me some great books to read, what would be your favorite book on autobiography, leadership, anything that really is quite inspirational to others who might be listening? Go, that's a really great book to have a read.
Again, it's interesting. I seldom read. That's not true. I have to go back to the two foundational texts for me: the autobiography of Malcolm X and the letters of Marcus Garvey. And the reason why they're really important to me in terms of leadership, because they're outside of my realm of expertise. These are men who are magnificent organic intellectuals who built movements where millions of people during their lifetime and outside of their lifetime have signed up to what they believe in. And I look at someone like Marcus Garvey and I went, oh my God, he bought a ship at a moment when African Americans were not buying cars. He bought a shipping line in order to create trade across the diasporic world. Outside of Twitter, he had 10 million followers. And I go, how did someone do that in 1919 to 1938? How was that done? And I think an analysis of not just the cult of personality, but how service becomes a magnet, I find to be the most inspiring autobiographies or leadership books that I could ever find.
Yeah.
What is their truth?
Yeah, well, I'm pleased you told me it was the letters of Marcus Garvey, because I found various different things on Marcus Garvey, and I read on Wikipedia and things like that, but I couldn't. I was trying to find the one.
Yeah, the one for me is the Letters and Opinions of Marcus Garvey, edited by his wife Amy Garvey, and that again, just for my money, he was like the Elon Musk of of that time, where literally it was the equivalent of him saying, yeah, no, let's put a spacecraft on the moon.
Yeah, fantastic. So we're now down to the last 2-minute top tip. So if you'd be good enough to introduce yourself again and what you do, and then give us your 2-minute top tip on leadership, that would be a nice way to bring it to a close.
I'm Kwame Kwei-Armah. I'm the artistic director of the Young Vic Theatre, amongst other things. And my 2-minute top tip about leadership. People don't have to love you. Don't do what you do for anyone else other than you. Make sure that you lead your team and everyone with the most generous of hearts. Focus on how you can be most effective, how you can reach the largest audience. And that doesn't just mean numbers. It might mean large in terms of depth, how deep the thing you do goes into the individuals that you are in contact with. But ultimately, leadership is about service. How are you serving?
That is brilliant. Thank you very much indeed, Kwame. I've really been honored to have you on the Inspiring Leadership Series.
Honored to you, sir.
And I do hope that we'll stay in touch. I found that really good. So thank you for sharing your wisdom experience with people. And we'll chat again soon. Just stay on the line. Stay on the line. Thank you, Kwame.